Imagine standing in the silence that follows the collapse of everything you thought you were. No goals, no identity, just a strange clarity and a terrifying emptiness. This is not the end. This is the beginning of something far more real. When the ego dies, we are not left with nothing. We are left with the truth. Today we explore how to move, not from ambition, but from alignment. How do we find motivation not from the mask, but from the soul? In each of us, there is another whom we do not know. There comes a moment, quiet, terrifying, and unmistakable, when the scaffolding of who we believed we were begins to collapse. We lose the job, the relationship, the identity we clung to, and with it, the ego shatters. Not into nothingness, but into fragments that reveal something deeper, something ancient. This is not the end of the self. It is the beginning of its descent. This descent is what some have called the night sea journey, the mythic voyage into the underworld of the psyche. In mythology, it's Inanna descending into the dark, or Osiris dismembered in the afterlife. In dreams, it shows up as falling into endless tunnels or being chased by a faceless figure. That figure is the shadow, the hidden part of us that we disowned in order to survive, the anger we suppressed, the desire we deemed shameful, the power we pretended not to have. In Jungian terms, the ego's fall is not a failure but an initiation. When the persona crumbles, the shadow steps forward, not to destroy us, but to complete us. Take the case of a successful lawyer who, after a breakdown, dreams of a wolf prowling outside his childhood home. He comes to see the wolf as his aggression, banished since boyhood, now demanding entry. As he integrates this primal part of himself, he doesn't become violent, he becomes whole, clearer, purposeful. The path to purpose, then, is not found in the light alone. It is carved through our darkest forests. Motivation after ego death does not come from goals imposed by society. It comes from the tension between who we are and who we're meant to be. The shadow, once feared, becomes guide, not because it flatters us, but because it forces us to face the truth. Only in embracing the parts of us we've buried can we rise with authenticity. And so the question becomes, not how do I get back to who I was, but rather, what is trying to emerge through the ruins of who I no longer need to be? What if your purpose isn't ahead of you, but beneath you, buried in the dark? In the next chapter, we'll descend even deeper into the fire that burns within the void. Will you enter? The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. Many of the sayings of Sangab are fully outgrown. There are times in life when everything falls apart. Careers end, relationships dissolve, identities unravel. And in that aftermath, we stand in the ruins of who we once were, uncertain of who we are now. It is a moment both devastating and sacred. This collapse is not the failure of the self, it is its rebirth. In Jungian psychology, this is the breakdown of the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world. When the persona crumbles, what is left? Silence, emptiness, but also the whisper of something deeper stirring beneath the wreckage. There is an old Sufi parable. A man's house burns down, and he falls to his knees in despair. But in the ashes he finds a buried key, one he had long forgotten. It unlocks a door to a part of his soul he never knew was closed. This is how the unconscious speaks to us, not through logic, but through image, emotion, and destruction. What feels like the end is often the psyche's attempt to initiate us into a more authentic existence. The collapse becomes the threshold. In therapy, a woman once shared recurring dreams of a cathedral falling into the sea. She clung to the idea that she must rebuild it exactly as it was, but through reflection she realized it wasn't hers to rebuild. The dream wasn't destruction, it was liberation. The ocean wasn't her enemy, it was her depth, calling her to build not a cathedral for others, but a sanctuary of her own. From ruin to renewal is not a straight line. It is a spiral. We revisit the same wounds, but each time from a new vantage point, more conscious, more integrated. The ego may resist, but the self, the deeper, wiser organizing principle within, guides the process, often through dreams, synchronicities, and subtle shifts. The question is not how do I fix myself, but what is life trying to grow in me now that my old form has broken? So, if you are standing in ruins, know this: you are exactly where transformation begins. But before we can build anew, we must first pass through the void, and within that void, there is fire. Will you walk into it? Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. After ego death, after the mask has been torn away, what remains is not clarity, but a void. A void, a vast and disorienting emptiness. Many fear this space. They rush to fill it, with distractions, with false identities, with borrowed dreams. But those who dare to remain, to sit in the stillness, often discover something astonishing. Beneath the silence, there is fire. Not the fire of ambition or achievement, but the fire of being. This is the libido in Jungian terms, the psychic energy of life itself, not just sexual, but creative, spiritual, archetypal. It lives deep within the unconscious, waiting for release, not through the ego's will, but through surrender to the self. Let me tell you a dream. A man, wandering in a frozen wasteland, stumbles upon a cracked mirror buried in the snow. Inside the mirror he sees not his face, but a hearth glowing with a quiet flame. He reaches for it, and the mirror melts into fire. He wakes weeping, feeling warmth for the first time in years. This dream speaks to the soul's truth. The false self, polished and cold, cannot sustain us. True motivation is not external, it burns from within. But it often hides in the places we've banished. Our rage, our grief, our longing. These are not enemies. They are sacred fuels. A young artist once came to therapy claiming she had lost all motivation. Her life looked perfect, but she felt dead inside. Through shadow work, she uncovered an abandoned part of herself. A wild, rebellious child who once painted with joy. That child had been exiled to meet expectations. When she welcomed her back, the fire returned. Not just to paint, but to live. To find true motivation, we must descend not upward toward ideals, but inward toward essence, into the void, into the forgotten, into the soul's furnace. This fire does not scream. It whispers, but once it is heard, it cannot be ignored. So the next time you feel numb, stuck, hollow, ask not what should I do. Ask what part of me have I silenced that still burns. And as you listen, something ancient begins to awaken. But fire alone is not enough. What will you become through it? In the next chapter, we emerge from the abyss, transform. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. To awaken is not to ascend into bliss, it is to fall deeply, terrifyingly into the abyss, that chasm within the psyche where light is swallowed, where meaning disintegrates, where the ego no longer knows how to pretend. This abyss is not a punishment, it is a rite of passage. In the ancient myth of Persephone, she is taken to the underworld, ripped from the world of spring and light. But her descent is not her end. It is her transformation. She returns not as the innocent maiden, but as the queen of the underworld, one who holds both life and death within her. In Jungian language, this descent mirrors the encounter with the unconscious. It is where the ego surrenders and the deeper self begins to stir, where we meet not only our fears, but also the energy hidden beneath them, the raw, untapped life force buried beneath years of repression. A man once told a dream he was drowning in black water, unable to breathe. But as he surrendered, he discovered he could breathe underwater. In that moment, he felt more alive than ever. That is the paradox. What we fear will destroy us often liberates us. Inner death of identity, of belief, of control is not the loss of life, but its reorientation. The energy once used to uphold the false self is now released. This is transformation. The abyss becomes the womb. But this rebirth is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who we were before the world told us who to be. The self, symbolized by the mandala, the eternal circle, does not emerge by striving, but by surrendering to the deeper current of the soul. And from that place, a new kind of motivation is born, not one driven by fear or image, but by meaning, alignment, and instinct. So if you find yourself in the dark, don't rush to escape it. Ask, what part of me needed to die so something greater could live? Because only those who have touched the abyss can carry its fire back to the surface. And in the next chapter, we'll explore that fire. The will reborn not from ego, but from awakening. Will you carry it forward? Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. After the fall of the ego and the long descent into the abyss, we emerge changed, no longer clinging to borrowed identities or hollow ambitions. And yet, a question lingers in the soul. What now? This is where will is reborn, but not the will driven by egoic desire or societal conditioning. No, this is a deeper will, an instinctual alignment with the self, the organizing force within the psyche that seeks wholeness, not success. In ancient alchemy, there's a stage called conjunctio, the sacred union of opposites. After the ego dissolves in the darkness, it must reunite with what it denied: the shadow, the feminine, the inner child, the divine. Out of this mystical union, something new is born, not a product of force, but of synthesis. A woman once shared a recurring dream. She is in labor, but no child is coming. Panicked, she tries to push, but nothing moves. Then a midwife appears and whispers, "You cannot birth what you do not love." She realizes that to bring something real into the world, she must embrace the unloved parts of herself. This dream is a metaphor for the rebirth of will, when our motivation no longer comes from who we think we should be, but from who we truly are. Then, and only then, does life begin to move through us. Jung spoke of the self as an inner compass, a guide that emerges through dreams, symbols, and synchronicity. To follow this compass requires trust, not control, listening, not striving, and the courage to act not from fear of failure, but from fidelity to the soul. The rebirth of will means no longer chasing motivation. It means becoming it. It means recognizing that your desire to create, to serve, to move is sacred, not because of its outcome, but because it aligns you with your deepest truth. So ask yourself, what have I longed to do, not because it would make me someone, but because it would return me to myself? In that question lies your direction. In that ache lies your will. But to follow it, you must first gather the fragments of the self that were scattered in survival. Next, we'll uncover those pieces hidden behind illusion. Will you dare to remember? The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Our lives are often a mosaic of fragments, shards of experience, pieces of identity gathered from childhood, culture, and survival. But what happens when the ego, that fragile construct, fractures? The self no longer a single coherent story, but a scattered puzzle with missing pieces. This fragmentation is both painful and revealing. It is a call from the unconscious to begin the sacred work of individuation, to gather, integrate, and assemble the self beyond the masks and illusions we have inherited. Jung likened the psyche to a broken vessel. Imagine an ancient pot shattered into many pieces. To repair it, you don't simply glue the shards back as they were. You must find a new way to hold them together, perhaps even create something more beautiful in its imperfection. There is a Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold lacquer, highlighting the fractures rather than hiding them. The cracks become part of the object's history and beauty, much like our own wounds. A young man once shared a dream of collecting scattered stars from the sky, one by one, placing them carefully into a bowl. Each star represented a part of himself he had lost: his courage, his kindness, his creativity. When the bowl was full, it shone brighter than before. This dream illustrates the journey of reclaiming our fragments, sometimes lost to trauma, sometimes cast aside to fit in. But these pieces hold the key to a deeper purpose. The illusion is believing that we are whole in the persona. The truth is, our wholeness is made in the tender act of assembling the broken parts. Purpose, then, is not a distant goal to chase, but an inner alignment, a tapestry woven from the fragments of our true self. So the question becomes, which fragments have I denied? What parts of me are waiting to be reunited? In facing this, we move beyond illusion, beyond the false narratives imposed by society or fear, and step into a more authentic existence. But integration is not the end, it is the beginning of movement. Next, we embark on the inner pilgrimage, from despair to direction. Are you ready to walk the path within? One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. There is a journey every soul must undertake, a pilgrimage not through distant lands, but deep within the labyrinth of the psyche. It begins, often in despair, when the ego has crumbled and the familiar maps no longer guide us. Lost, we stand at the crossroads, unsure which way to turn. This pilgrimage is the sacred path of awakening. In mythology, it is the hero's journey, descending into the underworld, confronting dragons, and returning transformed. Psychologically, it is the process of individuation, the soul's quest to integrate the shadow, confront the unconscious, and discover true direction. A parable tells of a wanderer who, searching for the meaning of life, encounters a blind man sitting by the road. The blind man holds a staff but does not move. "Why do you wait here?" the wanderer asks. The blind man replies, "I have lost my sight and my way. but I stay here until my inner eyes open. This waiting is not passivity, it is the pilgrimage's beginning, when despair becomes the soil from which insight grows. In therapy, many speak of this inner pilgrimage as a dark night of the soul, a time of intense confusion and loneliness, but it is also where the compass begins to form. The unconscious sends signs, dreams filled with symbols, sudden moments of clarity, encounters with the shadow self. For example, a woman dreamt of walking through a dense forest, each step heavier than the last, until she reached a clearing bathed in sunlight. That clearing was her true self, waiting patiently beyond fear and doubt. The pilgrimage from despair to direction teaches us that motivation born from external sources is fragile. True direction arises when we align with the inner call, a call that often whispers in the dark before becoming a roar. So the question is not where do I go, but who am I willing to become on this journey? And as you prepare to walk this path, remember, the inner pilgrimage is not about escape, it is about return. Return to the self hidden beneath the layers of illusion. In the next chapter, we ignite the soul's movement, transforming stillness into purposeful action. Are you ready to step forward? The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct, acting from inner necessity. After the long descent into the depths, after confronting the shadow and gathering the scattered fragments of the self, a stillness often settles, a quiet center within the storm. This stillness is not emptiness, but the fertile silence from which true action springs. It is the soul in motion, awakening not through force, but through an inner call that cannot be ignored. In the ancient myth of the phoenix, the bird dies in flames only to rise again from its ashes, reborn and renewed. This fiery transformation is not just an ending, but a beginning, a movement from stillness into life. In psychological terms, this moment reflects the union of opposites, where conscious will meets unconscious depth. The archetype of the self emerges here, guiding us not through logic or desire, but through the pull of meaning and purpose. Consider the story of a man who felt paralyzed by indecision, trapped in a long winter of his soul. One night he dreamt of a silent lake, perfectly still but holding the reflection of stars. As dawn broke, the lake rippled, sending waves outward, ripples that stirred life beneath the surface. When he awoke, he realized that the stillness within was not stagnation, but preparation for movement. This is the subtle yet powerful energy of the soul in motion. It moves quietly at first, like a seed breaking through soil, unseen but unstoppable. Motivation born here is not loud or desperate. It is steady, inevitable, like a river carving its path through stone. To ignite this inner fire requires patience, trust, and a willingness to listen deeply, to the whispers of dreams, to the stirrings of the body, and to the call of the soul. So ask yourself, what stillness am I resisting? What quiet call within longs to be answered? Because when the soul moves, it changes everything. And now, as this journey unfolds, the question remains, will you answer that call and step into the life waiting beneath the ashes? The fire is ready to burn, the soul is ready to soar. Are you ready to move?